Hi, this is Érika from Small Robot Studio. Welcome to my beginner guide to Nomad Sculpt. I designed this video for those who are brand new to this software or 3D sculpting in general. Feel free to follow step by step to create this little book or create your own design. Let's start with some basic navigation. Every new project in Nomad will look like this. To rotate your camera, you just have to drag one finger on your screen. To zoom in, that's a classic pinch with 2 fingers, and to pan as well, you only have to move 2 fingers. This sphere is our ball of clay that we can start moving around. I would like you to tap where it says wire in the bottom left. This is gonna show you how this sphere is made. In 3D sculpting, we work with topology. Topology is the arrangement of points, edges, and faces that create a whole object. The more topology we have, the more we can create detail. High topology is not always the best, especially when we are starting. We want to start with as few points as possible because that is easy to manipulate. So I want you to tap on the top left on the grid icon and focus on the area that says multi-resolution. We can pin this menu so it doesn't close. If you move along these levels, you will see how the topology of this sphere is reduced. This is really useful because we can work with detail at the same time with general shapes. And at any point, you can turn off this topology by tapping again on wire. Before we start playing around with our sphere, I really like to work with matte caps. This is just a way of shading your mesh. As you can see here, we are in PBR shading method. This is physics-based render. This is not the clearest if I want to see detail. When I am sculpting, not rendering, I prefer to use a matte cap. Something like this is pretty good, it's pretty visible. You can explore between the matte caps that come by default on Nomad. And we have our autosave popping up. This is a really cool feature which you can check on the project menu. By default, it will save every 5 minutes. I like to crank it up all the way to 10 minutes. If you really don't want to, you can deactivate it altogether or maybe deactivate the pop-out. I will do that for this video. Let's start experimenting with a few of the brushes that we are gonna use. On the left, you can increase the size of your brush here with radius. You can also increase the intensity, and this is an infinite slider. Even though it's set by percentage, you can always go beyond 100. And I'm gonna choose a regular clay brush. This is gonna push my clay up, or if I press this button on the left, this is gonna push my clay down. I recommend going through the different multi-resolution levels so you can appreciate how this brush behaves, depending on the level that you are at. You don't have to do anything fancy, just rotate around and play around. By the way, if you wanna rotate, you will have to tap on the background. If you tap on your mesh, it will start sculpting there, regardless if you're using your finger or an Apple Pencil. I like to go into the pressure menu and make a little modification there. Here on interaction, I'm gonna set my camera to finger and my sculpt to stylus. In this way, it doesn't matter if I press my mesh, I can still rotate with my finger, and my pencil, it's only gonna sculpt. If you wanna undo, all you have to do is a tap with 2 fingers, or here on the left, you can use these buttons. You can even use this history if you really wanna go all the way back down. And we are gonna start by sculpting the skull of our book. So this time, instead of clay, I'm gonna use the Move brush, which might be obvious, it lets me move my mesh around. Another tool that I'm gonna use very often is the Gizmo Tool. This lets me do some basic operations such as translate, rotate, or scale. So I know that my skull is gonna look somewhat compressed. Now I'm gonna start using the Move tool to get the jaw of that skull down. By the way, you will see that I am affecting one side and the other one is affected automatically. This is because we have a symmetry setting by default. You can turn it off by simply tapping on the icon. As I told you before, when I'm just blocking shapes, when I want to get a general idea of my shape, I rather work with low topology. It's less points, it's easier to manipulate. If I was working with a lot of points, it's way more difficult to control. It's okay if I am doing detail, but right now I am simply blocking out a shape. And I quite like that already. I think that is a good start for my skull. Let's try to do the orbits. I'm gonna use my clay brush, pressing sub. Make sure that you have symmetry activated, and let's start pushing these eyes down. Probably will need a lot more intensity, but the resolution is not great. I can sort of see it, but kind of looks pixelated. So maybe it's an opportunity to start working with higher detail. Let's try to do a cavity for the nose, an inverted heart shape. Let's pull some of this clay out to create the orbit of their eyes. And maybe we can even mark some teeth at the bottom. Let's see how this looks with our wireframe. It's kind of okay. There's some areas I don't fully like. For example, the teeth don't look very nice. They have a lot of texture. This is where our next tool really comes in handy, the Smooth tool. You can choose a brush on the right, or you have a shortcut button here on the left. So it doesn't matter which brush you're using. While you press this down, Smooth is gonna be active. And this is literally gonna smooth. This is gonna average out the surfaces, making them look much nicer at times. So I can smooth this part to get a nice fade. And again, smoothing is much easier when I have lower resolutions. Changing between those levels can help me out quite a bit. There we go. I don't know about you, but I don't love having this grid on the floor. That's very easy to get rid of. All you need to do is go to the display settings and tap on grid. This is a personal preference, I just don't like it. Let me introduce you to one of my favorite brushes, which is the Crease Brush. Just like its name say, it's gonna crease around. So I'm gonna use it to push this teeth more, really give it that shape to get a nice silhouette. That looks much better already, but I need to smooth out these shapes. I might need to go back a little bit with clay to really merge this. And let's do a little smooth so it looks all very pretty, all very nice. I'm gonna use crease once again just to really mark that shape of the teeth. And this already looks quite nice. The only thing that I don't like is how symmetric it is. So it's a good time to take my move brush, maybe just move lower 1 or 2 resolution levels. This should be fine. Let's turn symmetry off and let's make this design slightly more interesting. Maybe I can change the size of those eyes. I can move around this nose a bit, as well as the teeth, and we can consider our skull is pretty much done. Hey, make sure that you are subscribed with notifications on. Otherwise, you might be missing out on the many tutorials that we release for free each week here on YouTube. Let's carry on with the body of the book. And for that, we're gonna need a new bunch of clay, a new mesh. I'm gonna go into this scene menu and you will see that our original sphere is gonna be listed there. If you tap on this pencil, you can rename it, so we can call this skull. Let's now create a primitive. A primitive is a basic shape. This time, we're gonna use a box. I can still sort of see my skull there. To hide it, you only need to tap on the eye and it's gone. Not forever, just temporarily. Every single primitive that you create, as you can see on the right, I cannot use a brush yet because I need to tell Nomad how do I want my primitive, how big, how small, how much topology do I want there. We can use my gizmo to give it a general shape. Actually, I'm gonna bring back my skull so I can get an idea of the size of my book. And I'm gonna use these controllers to scale it up and roughly position it where I want it. We have two ways to control the size of this book. We have these big circles, which is gonna control it equidistant, or if you tap on these small circles, it's gonna only affect one side. So if you are happy with this, all you have to do is tap on validate. And now all the brushes are gonna be back and we can modify it again. Also, we're not really gonna use much brushes for this book. Now that I have the size, I can hide my skull. I could try sculpting the spine, but it's not gonna be very easy. Instead, I'm gonna create yet another primitive. This time, I'm gonna create a cylinder. And with this cylinder, I'm gonna put it where the spine of the book is gonna be. And I could try to do it by hand, but that's gonna be kind of difficult. Instead, I'm gonna use this snap option over here. The number that I put here is how many degrees this is gonna snap to. See, this is going every 10 degrees. I like to have it in 45. I personally like to have it on 45. Now, you might have noticed that on the top right, we have a little cube that helps us orient ourselves. It's telling me where I'm looking at the front, at the bottom, at the right. And if you tap on that brush, for example, here on the top, it's gonna snap to a perfect top view. Any view that you do it, it's gonna snap. Very, very useful. Here on the interface menu, I'm gonna tap where it says perspective. And by activating this here, you will see on the buttons that now I have that same button visible there. Just to explain you this, I'm gonna bring back my grid. It says right now that we are in a perspective view, but when I turn it off, it changed into an orthographic view. You will see that these lines that were originally going diagonally now are going perfectly straight. This means that there is no perspective distortion. This can be very useful if you want to be precise about making things match. Let's go to a perfect top view, and now that we have no perspective distortion, I'm gonna move this and scale it so it fits the book. If you're still having trouble understanding what's the difference between perspective and orthographic view, let me bring 2 more cubes to show you. Currently I am on a perspective view. You will see that both are the same size, but the one that's closer to us looks bigger. But when I change to orthographic, they both look the same size. Why? Because there is no perspective distortion. Depth doesn't matter. The sizes are always kept the same. I'm just gonna get rid of these boxes by tapping on the rubbish bin. I have 2 meshes sort of simulating how a book looks like, but it's not really there. How about I combine them to create one mesh only? To do this, I'm gonna go into the scene menu and I'm gonna select with this checklist the 2 objects that I wanna combine into only one mesh. For this, I'm gonna choose Voxel Merge. This is gonna calculate a new topology by mixing both geometries. You can change this resolution and the checkerboard will show you the size of the topology. There you go, you have only one object and it's all together in only one mesh. We have a few bumps here on the side, which we could treat a little bit with a smooth to get rid of those imperfections. Just watch out for the corners. You might not want to smooth the corners too much, or they're gonna lose their sharpness. Now this is already a bit better, but still not quite a book. I need to make that hollow inside. I am going to create a duplicate of the very same shape over here. And this time, instead of merging the shapes together, I am gonna make a hole with that same shape. Let's use the gizmo and I'm gonna make it a bit longer to the sides. Let's make it slightly smaller in general and maybe elongate it. So everything here, it's gonna be a hole. Now to make this hollow, the process is very similar to what we did before. The only difference is that the shape that I wanna subtract, I'm gonna turn off. As long as it's selected, it's gonna look shaded, but when I select something else, it's gonna be gone. I'm gonna select both objects here on my scene, and once again, I'm gonna do a voxel merge. There we go, we have the hollow of the body of my book. And I can always bring back my skull so we can fit it nicely. Although my skull is rounded, how is it gonna fit a flat book? If I tap on it, I can edit on it again, or I can simply select it once again here. So let's use a tool to flatten it out before I actually fit it there. If you type on this icon solo, it's gonna hide everything that is not my skull. This time I'm gonna look for the tool that is called Project. All I'm gonna do is push my topology, and because I'm pushing it flat, I'm gonna use this line selection. Let's look at it from a side view. Probably orthographic, very useful. So with your pen, I'm gonna trace a line. Everything that is on the white side is gonna be pushed. But again, this is by hand. How am I gonna get this angle to be a perfect 90 degree? That is very easy. If you go to this menu, change your rotate step all the way up to 90 degree. Now it's always going to be either vertical or horizontal. There we go. Now it is all flattened down. The exact same topology as we had before, except it's flattened there. I can deactivate solo, and with my gizmo I can place my cute little skull there. Let's now create the pages of my book. Let's go back to scene, rename this so we don't get lost, and create a new box primitive. And all I have to do is resize it so it fits within the pages. It's okay if there is a little bit of clipping between the geometries. That seems to be good enough for me, so I'm going to validate it. This works, but it's honestly a bit boring looking. How about we make some individual pages? Before I carry on, I'm gonna name it, and now I'm gonna press on the primitive plane. Just like its name, this is gonna create just a plane. Nothing too exciting. Let me rotate it to the side. But this time I'm gonna use my topology. This is really high topology. So I'm gonna bring this slider way down to make it easier for me to manipulate. Somewhere around 7 works perfectly for me. Because I want to bring it all the way down, I'm gonna create at least a few pages to break some of this perfect symmetry. And here on the right, I'm gonna tap where it says clone to create a duplicate of that page. Maybe once again, 3 is a good number to break this evenness. Let's validate that shape. I'm gonna solo it. Let's look at it from the top. It doesn't matter if I'm in perspective view or not. And I'm gonna use my move brush to make this slightly more interesting. Break that symmetry so it doesn't look as perfect. And maybe give some curvature to this page. That makes my book look way more interesting. Let's do the same with another page. Let's do something slightly different. Don't forget to validate so you can start playing with your mesh. Maybe I can add a little smooth to make this a softer corner. That looks good enough. Let's work on the last one. Validate, solo it, and yet again. If I had a higher topology, this would be a lot more difficult to do. And I could even add some variation to these pages as well, just to make my prop look slightly more cartoony, less of a boring primitive. And we are done with the body of the book and the pages. Now I'm gonna create some corner protection for my book. Something maybe that would be made of metal. So let's go back and create a new box primitive. This time I'm gonna make this guy quite small and somewhat flat. And I think this is a good size. I'm gonna create a little clone and put it to the side. And I'm gonna start modifying this using these little controllers to make this slightly longer. And once I like it, I can take my base and create a clone. I'm gonna make one run long. So I'm gonna bring this controller and take this all the way to the spine of the book. Let's not yet validate in case I want to do some modifications. Choose another one, clone it, and finally this would be the very last one. So I'm just going to use my last cube to create this little spiral. And because I'm done doing modifications, I can start validating. So just tap on them, validate. As you have probably already guessed, the thing that I have selected is gonna be shaded lighter. If you wanted to change this, you only have to go into the display settings and untap darken unselected meshes, and everything is gonna look the same. If you are also not quite sure what is the thing that is selected, I also quite like to activate outline. As you can see, this creates a line outside, which if you scroll down, you can change its thickness or even its color. Another tool that I use very often. And now that everything is selected, let's all voxel merge it. If you choose a really high number, you will probably get a warning from Nomad telling you that that is probably a really high topology. For these sort of things, we don't really need to go that high. This might be enough. As long as the result looks pretty to you, as the shapes are not lost, we are in the right direction. We got one corner protector, and we could go around and repeat this process to get all the other ones. But if they're gonna look the same, it would be probably a much better idea to simply duplicate it. So I'm gonna go into the symmetry menu while my corner protector is selected. And I'm gonna activate here on the advanced section, show line or show plane, both at the same time. This is gonna show me the center from which the mirror is gonna be created. So that looks good to me. I might go ahead and mirror depending on which side I'm working on. Let's do a left to right, and we got it. Perfect mirror. I don't have to do it again. It saves me a lot of time. Depending on the axis that you are working on, you can change between X, Y, Z, or even have them all together. Now to create the bottom, all I need to do is duplicate by tapping on this double square, and I can now align it to the bottom. Now, because this is the very same object, I'm gonna combine them. But I'm gonna do a different kind of combine. I'm simply gonna do a simple merge. This is not gonna change the topology at all. This is just gonna stack them up in only one object. There we go, and we can name this corners. And I'm gonna do the very same thing with these loose pages. I'm just gonna simple merge them so they are all together, and I can name them loose pages. Now that I'm done creating mirrors, I can deactivate these lines. And if you want to admire what you have done so far, you can go into the tools all the way down to the one that says view, which will let you rotate around without anything blocking your view. You might have noticed that sometimes the rotation is a little bit difficult to manipulate. It doesn't really go in the direction where you want. If you go into the camera menu, we can change from turntable into trackball. This makes the rotation slightly freer. This can be a little bit difficult to manipulate at times, but it also gives me a bit more freedom, which I will need to create the straps on the spine of the book. And for this, I want to show you another tool. You might already understand how masks work if you are a Painter software user. In short, you paint an area that you want to protect. Anything that is painted black, it's not going to be affected. If I use any brush, I'm just going to take my clay brush and go around, you will notice that the areas around my mask are modified, but not anything that is black. Masks are the best. They help me protect, they help me keep areas intact. But one other favorite thing that I love from masks is that anything that I paint, I can go here into my mask menu and I'm gonna select where it says extract shell. Let's set this thickness to at least 1 and tap on extract. So that shape that I painted is gonna make a geometry out of that. Another excellent, very useful tool. I'm gonna use that to create these straps from the side. But instead of painting this mask by hand, I'm gonna choose the next tool, which is called Select Mask. And I'm gonna use the rectangle selection. Make sure that you are in an orthographic view, not perspective, and I'm gonna create this selection right here, but I actually only want one. So I'm gonna clear my mask right here, deactivate symmetry, and I can try again to create this shape. Let's isolate my book to see my mask, and I created my mask. It's nice, but it's also created from the inside. So if I try to extract this, it's gonna extract it from the inside, which maybe I do not like. I'm gonna snap to a side view, and this time I'm gonna pick a lasso mask selection. This is gonna be a freehand selection. But I wanna unmask, I wanna remove this paint that I have here. So I'm gonna tap on this button, unmask, and I'm gonna go around just on the inside to get rid of that mask there, but I still have it there on the outside. Now I should be able to very easily extract this. You might want to change the settings if you don't want it as thick, and I'm gonna lower this border smoothness because I want it to have a bit of a corner like the rest of the book. This seems like a good size, and once again it breaks that silhouette that I had from the book. I can bring the rest in to see how this starts looking. But for this one, I don't want it to be a rectangle shape. Everything is already quite rectangle. That is somewhat boring. So just like I did for the skull, to flatten it, I'm gonna do the same. I'm gonna use my project tool. I'm gonna bring it back all the way to 0 so this angle is free. And don't forget, white is gonna be pushed in. Oh no, it disappeared. Why did that happen? That is because symmetry is active, so it's pushing it actually from both sides. So I might want to deactivate symmetry there. And there we go. I don't mind that this is not perfect. I actually like that imperfection. It adds to the cartooniness of this prop that we are creating. Let's delete that mask that we had there. You can quickly select a mask tool by using this button and just tap on clear. And we got this side strap, which if you really want to, you can modify a little bit with your gizmo. And I do want to have more than one, so I am going to clone them. If you cannot quite see your book, this is a good option to start moving around your madcaps and explore which one lets you see things better. Now it's a good opportunity to add some imperfections to the book, just like we did for the pages. So I'm gonna select the corners, the body as well, and I'm gonna select all of these new meshes that create those straps that I just created. With the outline, I can see everything that is selected, and I'm gonna go ahead and do a simple merge. And I'm gonna call this body. Now, before we were using the move tool, this could be useful. The only problem is that you will see that the corners don't follow. This tool is set to only select one mesh without affecting the other ones. It's only affecting those that are within the symmetry, but not really all together. If I want to affect everything at the same time, I would be better off by choosing drag. Let's turn symmetry off, because that can be a bit boring if it all looks the same. And you can see that now it's selecting everything. I will make this slightly smaller. Now I'll push this maybe a little bit outside, maybe give it some curvature there, and maybe you don't want to affect the top part. So, do you remember what was the tool for protecting stuff? Yes, you got it. We're gonna use a lovely mask. So let's mask the top. It doesn't have to be a perfect selection. And we can go ahead and modify the bottom. And now the top is intact. I can go to the top while selecting my mask button, invert that mask, and do the opposite. Just make some tiny movements, don't modify it too crazy. We only want to add a little bit of cartooniness, but you don't want to exaggerate this. Let's erase that mask and look at my book, looking much better, looking quite cartoony now. If you are done doing all of these modifications and you want to separate these meshes, you can go back here to Scene and tap where it says Separate. You're gonna lose the naming, which can be somewhat annoying, but you can always do that again. I'm gonna select once again my clay brush, and I'm gonna snap to a front view, but this time I'm gonna tap and hold on front, and this is gonna lock in my front. So now I can zoom in without losing that perfect front view, or I can pan and still have my perfect front view without any rotation happening. I'm gonna use once again my Crease Tool, because I want to make some nice carving, some kind of flourish going there. You might want to activate the Lazy Rope Stabilizer or some stroke smoothing. If your lines are looking not very pretty, this is gonna help you stabilize these lines. And even if your hand shakes a little, your lines are gonna be very pretty. Let's finish up that flourish. And that is looking very pretty. Let's tap now on those corners, and I'm gonna use a little bit of smoothing to make these corners slightly different, thinking that they might have some wear. I don't want everything to look perfect. Don't make it all symmetrical. Think where things would be more worn. Same with the straps. Let's break a little bit that perfect symmetry. Oops, we got a little line going on here because of the mask we did previously, but this is where our soft brush can come in very handy. I don't think it's terrible because it makes the book look somewhat broken if something happened here, some kind of story behind it. That is all good. And just to finish off, I'm gonna use the Flatten Tool. As you can guess with its name, it flattens things. I'm just gonna lower a lot of intensity, and I'm gonna use it just very subtly on the corners, as if this book fell on the side. And I think that we can consider our book finished. Now we can go back to a PBR shading and rotate around this light so we can get a better view of my book. This is looking quite nice. To finish off, to be able to see my whole prop, I'm gonna tap on this Nomad Sculpt logo and I'm gonna activate a turntable right here. This is gonna rotate my prop, and now I can show it off on social media, on Instagram, wherever you like to hang out. So I hope that you found this project good to get started with Nomad. If you want to learn more about these tools, check out my other videos in which I review them and break them down with a lot of detail. I look forward to see what you sculpted. Feel free to tag me on social media. That's it for this tutorial. If you find it useful, make sure that you leave a like so other people can find it. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe, as we are bringing out CG and illustration tutorials every week. Become a patron and access tutorial assets, bonus content, a private Discord, and more by clicking in the link below.